Hello. Hello.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Just give me a minute, Surajit. I will start.
Yes.
ऐसा चल रहा है सितंबर एंड में रहेगा।
Okay, a very good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
This
Hello.
meeting is being
Very
recorded.
good evening, ladies. Can you see the screen, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Good. Thank you. Now, what is for today's topic is we'll not take a long class today because this is such a topic that more or less every modern day surgeon has a good understanding. 20 years back, maybe surgeons did not or had a technical, say, difficult. All of them good understanding about what is a liver anatomy, at least for the initiation. This now, ladies and gentlemen, what is that? I will like to approach me of the liver as you are a surgeon who is more or less with your MBBS knowledge, that what they taught you in anatomy is again something when you came to your final year of MBBS or when you are preparing for your NEET PG exams. Well, you got to know that there were also something called as segments of the liver, and in anatomy that the first thing that I learned that an organ has segments probably was the lung. I hope, please correct me if I am wrong. Remember that the lung were known to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and all of these interesting things. Now, when I became or when I was preparing for my NEET exams, then I came to know about that the liver also had this funny nomenclature 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now that what started days. Now in internship, you do not get to see the liver that much. Well, during my MS days, the first that I asked my teacher was that, how do you find a segment 3 or segment 4? Well, he said that he answered to me in a very serious note. Well, he told me that the more you operate, the more you will learn. I still was not satisfied. So after my completion of my MS, I went to work with a transplant team. Okay. And then gradually working with the transplant team made me very interested into something called as this anatomy of the liver. And the more you work with the liver transplant team, they are going to tell you more with radiology that how to integrate and into a liver that looks very dull and brown on the outside to work into exactly what is the anatomy to understand. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you what is my approach that I have understood to that. Now, there were many names in anatomy to consider. Definitely, the name that we considered the biggest and definitely maybe the most respected of all the anatomical surgeons is Cunard. The pronunciation is not exactly Cunard, it is Cuno. So, there are multiple books that you can refer to for anatomy, starting from your Saviston. And when I talk about the anatomy of the liver, definitely Kuno is known to have proposed the division of the liver there were other people also who were responsible for more or the less these various divisions of the liver, and more or the less to make us understand, etc. Is the basic thing that we have to understand beyond the names of this. Now, when you talk about the anatomy of the liver, again, as I have said, if you talk about the gross anatomy of the liver talks about that there is something called as a right lobe and a left lobe, which is made right and left because there is something called as the falciform ligament. Now, why should I be more worried with the falciform ligament is because when you get to do a surgery, this is what you get. You get to see the falciform. Can I see? Is everyone able to see the screen? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Good. If you are able to see the screen, then ladies and gentlemen, understand that when you view a patient on a lap chole, if this is the liver, this is the falci, which you get to see, and this is the falci that comes from the anterior abdominal wall. Now, why should I be interested in the falci is because the falci, for two reasons technically. Reason number one, that when you need raising the liver, or when you need to do something on the liver and you need to operate around this area called as the hilum, always remember tie the falci or the falciform ligament much close to the parietal surface of the liver, the parietal abdominal wall, and always give two ligatures in this. The reason for giving a ligature is that there are veins in this which can bleed. If you have done an open cholecystectomy, I think you have encountered such bleeding occasionally from the falci. And sometimes, please understand, the bleeding can be pretty serious bleed. If you are doing a lap chole, try not to puncture the falci because, again, as I have said, you get a bad hematoma. Now, as the minute you divide the falci, the liver is technically, you can grasp the liver, you can grasp the falci, and it helps you in mobility of the liver. Now, another point to remember, what is another point to understand is that when you trace these veins in the falci, what is very important is that it goes to the hilum of the liver like this, but more important so, when it goes to the hilum of the liver, I find that the falci comes in a fissure on the liver, and exactly at the bottom of the falci, you get the left extrahepatic duct. So the next time you do an open cholecystectomy and you want to see how the anatomy of the liver looks like, the easiest part of the anatomy of the liver is to find the hilum of the liver, is just trace the falci down, believe me. Just trace the falci down, whatever can be the difficulty in this. Now, why should I be knowing about this anatomy? The anatomy, this is very important if you are ever approaching a patient of a bile duct injury. Now, why should I be knowing about these bile duct injuries? Because bile duct injuries are such a common thing nowadays in your post-laparoscopy era that all surgeons at least should know the principles of a bile duct repair. And you have been taught, or you will be taught about, that all bile duct injuries, particularly the type E ones, will ultimately need a form of a hepatico-jejunostomy. I think this has been taught by Dr. Sinha, and I will again repeat. Now, when we were students, we were told that if this is the bile duct injury, you are required to take a piece of intestine, open the knot, and then freshen the margin, join this end with this part. We have now known that this is not exactly a very happy thing to do, because for only one single reason, is because the surface area that we get in this point is very less. This is not the thing that I wanted to do. Hence, what I want is a big surface area, and to get the left hepatic duct like the one that you can see in the picture, believe me, the easiest 5-minute rule that you want to have this one is just trace the falci. Ladies and gentlemen, just trace the falci. Believe me, this is the quickest way you can find the extrahepatic part of the left duct. And exactly behind this, you find the left artery, or the left pedicle will be the better word, which is all of them in a single packet. And then the first one is always the bile duct. God has been gracious, and you open the bile duct, and that's it. You approach the left duct, the right duct. This is all about the first anatomy that you need to know about the falci. The second bit of anatomy is that the falci contains veins which are pretty connecting with the umbilical veins, and hence a patient with an portal hypertension, the veins sometimes are very large, and thus operating in patients of portal hypertension, this does become a challenge, particularly if you are planning to do a lap chole in a patient with a portal hypertension. Try not to injure these veins. Okay. Now, the other part about this liver, before you talk about the various segments of the liver, is the liver is kept in place, please understand, not at all by the ligaments. This is something that I taught within the liver resection class. The liver is kept in place because this is what I thought in my whole anatomy classes throughout an MBBS, that how on earth does the liver, which is a 1.5 to 2 kilo thing, just is being held ligaments. So when I asked my teachers in anatomy, they all told me that when to understand that the falciform is the ligament, and the falciform is hanging the liver up like, well, so someone is taking a 2 kilo rice bag, and then he has a small rubber band to hang the 2 kilo the rice bag. I was not very happy until and unless I came to become a surgeon. And while I was a surgeon, during my MS days also, I was not very happy because in general surgery, as you see, you do not get to see the hepatic veins very commonly. So after I completed my MS, the minute I went on to work in a transplant unit, well, they showed me how exactly these veins looked like. And believe me, until and unless I had a full vision about what is exactly the liver anatomy, then I could not appreciate what was going on. But by the time to reach this anatomy, as we have discussed in the last classes also, you get to cut a few ligaments around the liver. And these ligaments around the liver that are there on the right are called the right triangular, which extends from the liver to the diaphragm. And on the left, you get the left triangular, which ends from the liver to the diaphragm. Now, these are again ligaments that are easily cut while you do an open or a laparoscopic surgery, but there is a few caution when you cut about the left ligament. Now, there is an important note to understand, because left ligament, why do you need to cut the left ligament? The reason about cutting the left ligament is you can take a diathermy and you can just go on cutting the left triangular ligament. Remember, a phrenic, or you have the phrenic veins or the phrenic vessels, etc. Now, when you take this route, the dotted arrow is the direction that you cut. Why do you need to understand, or why do you need to cut this left triangular? Left triangular exposure is particularly important if you are planning to do a fundoplication, or if you are planning to take down something at the G junction. This is a step that is very helpful. But there are few words or cautions to be understood. The first of the cautions to be understood is that sometimes there are small veins which course along this ligament and go to the diaphragm. So that is one point to be understood, which is sometimes a nasty bleed. The next point is that how much to stop and where to stop. The more we go medially, what happens obviously is that the left hepatic vein is a rare bad encounter. So please know when to stop, otherwise you will injure the left hepatic vein. So these are the two main points to remember, talking about the left triangular ligament. Now, when you talk about the right triangular ligament, as you can see in this picture, so this is the right triangular ligament. And when you talk about the right triangular ligament, remember the right triangular ligament, as discussed in the liver resection class, is going to mobilize the liver fully medially. Now, while you talk about the right triangular ligaments and divide it from the diaphragm, always understand there will be lots of retroperitoneal veins which are encountered until and unless you attain such a stage where the vena cava is standing and the right lobe of the liver has been mobilized completely. Even at this stage, remember that there are multiple veins which come from the right lobe of the liver, and these multiple veins drain into the inferior vena cava. Now, these multiple veins that we have, so these are the multiple veins that are there. And as you can see in the picture, in these multiple veins, there is usually a covering brain, which is sometimes called as the ligament of Makuchi. Now, laparoscopic surgeons or robotic surgeons, what they do is that they take an endo-GIA white cartridge and they will go for division of this ligament. In an open surgery, I feel that it is better identified and each of these small tributaries are given their due time rather than put a clip, put a 3O silk suture, and believe me, that creates a good knot, secure knot, and is mobilized. Now, the way this goes on, the more you mobilize it medially, particularly in the upper part, at one point of time, you get to see one part of a lobe of the liver called as a caudate lobe, which drains independently with the trunk, and the caudate lobe of the liver is identified that this is what is the caudate lobe. Now, the last class when you talked about the liver dissections, if you're dealing with a malignancy, particularly of the cholangiocarcinomas or the central areas, that means segment 4B, segment 5, segment 8, it is always a good idea to include the in the resection. So this is the better idea to include the caudate. So this is all about the first part about ligaments around the liver. Now, when you talk about the liver parenchyma, or how do you go for a liver parenchyma dissection? Now, liver parenchyma, as discussed in the last, that the main thing that divides the liver parenchymas are veins. So we have something called as a middle hepatic vein. The middle hepatic vein is technically the line that divides the liver into two parts. One, the right lobe, and one, the left lobe. So this is how we as surgeons understand. Now, if you are planning for a right lobectomy, try not to take the middle hepatic vein. If you are planning a left lobectomy, try not to take the middle hepatic vein. Now, why am I telling you not to take the middle hepatic vein is because you are then depending upon only one vein, the right, or on one vein, the left, for the venous drainage. Okay? So, it is a very difficult terrain to save the vein, but still if you can, it is good idea to preserve the vein. Now, what is the gross anatomy? So, the gross anatomy is that the inferior vena cava has three veins. One, the middle hepatic vein. This is something that we have known, and this is the most important vein because out of all the liver resections, taking out the right or the left of the liver is based upon you understanding this part, which is a pretty difficult one to understand. Because when you talk about the hepatic artery, portal vein, and the bile duct, that is pretty easy because they are seen outside the liver, and when you ligate them, one part of the liver is going to become black. We know that. But this vein story is not that easy because you cannot get to see the vein. And hence what we have understood is that it is better to take the help of an intraoperative Doppler if you are a beginner to begin a liver resection that tells you from the surface how depth is the vein, or it is always very important that you have a CT angio with a 3D recon of the veins of the liver before you plan a liver resection. Now, for transplant surgeons, this is a mandatory thing. Without a venous anatomy of the liver and without a portal and an arterial anatomy of the liver, they will not even think about picking up the patient or admitting the patient. They will like to see the anatomy For that, they will have a specialist radiologist who is going to do an CT angio, and then with a CT angio, the gentleman is or the lady is going to combine all these datas and then make a beautiful picture about what is what. So this is all about, sir, middle hepatic vein. Now, by the side of the middle hepatic vein, things are easy for us to understand. The segment 1, as I have said, is the caudate lobe, which is the independent lobe of concern. It is segment 1 because I consider that he is the first boy in the class, always very close to the vena cava. And as you can see, he or she is so close to the teacher that there is a separate dedicated vein from the caudate lobe to the inferior vena cava. Now, but the rest of the class, the teacher divided the class into the right and the left, and then she sent to monitors to understand. These monitors could have been in the right hepatic vein, and the other monitor is the left hepatic vein. Okay, so these are the two monitors. Now, what these monitors did was they divided the classes into segment 2, segment 3, segment 4, which was again divided into 4A and 4B, segment 5, segment 6, segment 7, segment 8. So, sir, this is the basic understanding about or 2, 3, 4A, 4B, 5, 6. Now, I should have used a Roman numeral rather than 2 and 3. This is what usually is the right nomenclature. This is, oh, well, I do not know, because after the Brisbane classification, people have started using this one also, but I will prefer more on the Roman nomenclature. Now, coming about the segments, so more or less there are 9 segments to consider. The middle hepatic vein divides it into a right and a left, and with this anatomy, more or less, we know about this picture. The middle hepatic vein, Kuno described it to lie in a line that joins from the gallbladder to the inferior vena cava. So if you are operating on the liver, it is always good to start your parenchyma. Say, for example, you are going for a right hepatectomy or a right lobectomy, and you are not very sure about where to find the middle hepatic vein. The only point in the whole story, as I have said this before, is talk to your radiologist and only ask that gentleman is that, tell me what is exactly the distance from the surface that I am going to encounter the vein. He is going to say maybe 1 centimeter is the distance. Now, this is only told, as I've said, by a very trained radiologist, because until and unless we have a trained radiology, it becomes a very difficult part. Okay, the next part of the story, sir, is that this line then that is made is called as the line of Cantilli. This line that is made then is called as the line of Cantilli, which is known to divide this one. Some people say that it makes with the horizontal line with axis of the body a 45 degree. I feel this is more theoretical things discussed, but for us, we have to understand the line of Cantilli because we have to plan a liver resection. Now, after these things are done, we have known about the segments of the liver, the right and the left. Then we should know about, after this, what is the arterial and the biliary anatomy of the liver and what is the things that should interest us. We start always with the hilum because as a general surgeon, we get very afraid of the hilum. Now, when I talk about the hilum, the better part of the hilum to understand is what exactly is the hilum and what exactly is the story of the hilum. Now, the word hilum, remember that the word hilum of the liver is technically coming from a very Latin word. And when you talk about those Latin guys, they did not understand this liver stories about and what is this about this hilum stories. So what they understood was that if you have a beans, so this is a beans, and this is the beans who is smiling at you. Now you know the beans has an area which was technically white in color, and you could split the beans with this. So they called this to be the hilum. And remember, the kidneys, technically the 7 hilum. So this is what the people told about something called as the hilum. Now, when you talk about the hilum and when you talk about what is exactly this hilum story, then the things got a little bit changed. When you talk about in the liver was enveloped by a peritoneal covering called as the peritoneum, which was later turned to be the Glisson's capsule of the liver. The Glisson was not the first man to name this. I will say that this gentleman got very lucky, and before someone could name that, okay, it was his fascia or it was his layer, then Glisson got to name the layer around the liver as the beginning part of this. And this was what exactly was the first part to know about what was the part about the Glisson's capsule. Job done. Now, when you talk about the Glisson's capsule, the next part of the story is in the Glisson's capsule. The Glisson's capsule undergoes a couple of condensation. And these condensations in the Glisson's capsule are important for everyone to remember only one important point. At various points around the liver, the Glisson's capsule undergoes some condensations, and these condensations are done to help the anatomy or to make us understand the anatomy of the liver. Now, when you talk about this part, then what should always be an important part is around the gallbladder or the inferior aspect of the gallbladder till the neck of the gallbladder, the Glisson's capsule undergoes a strong condensation and is called as the cystic plate. We know that because if you have done a lap chole, more or less all of you have done a lap chole, and you know that what is a cystic plate, which is technically an avascular plate which lies behind or between the liver and the gallbladder. And when you talk about the avascular plate between the liver and the gallbladder, this is a plate more or less which helps in differentiating the liver and the gallbladder and is usually traversed by something called as the ducts of Laschka. Now, ducts of Laschka, if you talk about what exactly are ducts of Laschka are not equal to something called cholecystohepatic ducts, but for an average, for all of us, we are not anatomy guys, this is equal to something called as the duct of Laschka, which is something that we should remember. Okay, right. So, sir, if you remember up till this part that this is something called as the duct of the Laschka, what is very important is that the cystic plate is thus an avascular plate in condensation. Now, till the cystic plate, the stories were very okay because it was a thin plate and you have appreciated that in lap chole. The problem is the more you go medially, the cystic plate becomes very thick and then is called as the hilar plate. Some people call it as a portal plate. So when you talk about the hilar plate or the portal plate, it is the hilar plate or the portal plate which is important. And this portal plate or the hilar plate, if you think about how do I understand the portal plate or the hilar plate, I understand that the portal plate or the hilar plate, if you have seen, say for example, a wrap, okay, I know I am a foodie guy, so I understand by foods or and roll, or if you talk about Mexicans, they call it as a burrito. So if you can compare it with a food item, then I feel that if you compare that this is the layers of the peritoneum, and if I shade these layers into these various structures, then all the structures that are entering the liver, that means the portal vein, okay, that means the bile ducts, and the artery is in this aspect. Now I've drawn a very exaggerated diagram for you to appreciate only one, that the things are not exactly like this. Things are much more complex, but if you can understand that this is the way the anatomy around the hilar plate is, then when you mobilize the hilar plate, it becomes an easy job to identify that the portal vein is behind, and behind the portal vein, there will be another structure. Now, why should I be interested in this knowledge is because there will be an accessory artery sometimes, which is on this side, which is not this artery. This artery is the accessory right hepatic artery, which is important for us to know because sometimes injury to this artery can produce bad things. So it is good to understand this anatomy of the liver called as the hilar plate. Okay, and with the hilar plate or the portal plate, we have understood that the hilar plate is technically the area. Let me take the green color. This part that I have shaded is technically the hilar plate. Whereas if you go a little down, this part that I have shaded, okay, is technically the same name, the portal plate, the hilar plate. And when you go to the left side along the umbilical fissure, so what we'll use is that we'll use another color for you guys. And what I will do is that I will use another color. So let me take this color and let me go to the left side. And when I go to the left side, this is the umbilical plate. So can you quickly tell me how many plates have I discussed? Hello?
3.
3. Okay, good one. Where do you find the umbilical plate in, because this comes as an MCQ in your NEET exams. Where do you find from Mr. Abhistan? Where do you find the umbilical plate, sir? So the umbilical plate is in relationship with which plate? Is in relationship with which plate, sir? Hello. Now see, the umbilical plate, as you can see, is in relationship with the left hepatic duct. Okay. Now, when you talk about the umbilical plate and when you have observed that this is the umbilical plate, remember that in a 3-dimensional concept, the story is not that easy. As I have shown you in the picture, the story does not become so simple, sir. Then, if I am talking about all these coverings of the liver and all about these things, then let me make you understand another important plate concept, something called as the Arantian plate. Now that becomes a difficult thing. I do not know whether you have known or heard about this name. Something called as the Arantian plate. Now, when I talk about the Arantian plate becomes a very difficult one to remember because Arantian plate is, remember that this is to segment 2 and segment 3. Now, what is going down is the segment 4 and it goes behind. So, the Arantian plate basically is more of a condensation about the hilar plates or the portal plates that goes to the segment 4. So this is the picture that I wanted you to understand. If you go on the right side, what is this plate, sir? If you go on the right side along this, what is the plate that is leading to the hilar plate and the portal plate?
Cystic plate.
Cystic plate. Then we get the hilar and the portal plates. All of them are the same name. And after this one, we get technically the umbilical plate. And then when you go down, you get the segment 4. Now, some people consider that no, you are wrong. Segment 4 can also be draining on this side and this side. 4A or 4B, and then you go to the segment 2 and segment 3. So this is how more or less we understand about the Aruntian plate, which is more or less a good idea to understand. That means to get into the Aruntian plate, what will be important is you have to mobilize the segment 2 and the segment 3, that means the umbilical plate. And after you have mobilized the umbilical plate, then you are likely to get the Aruntian plate. So this is what you are required to know. So this is technically called as the basic portal anatomy that we as surgeons face initially little difficulty in understanding. Now, after we have talked about this part, then the next of the structures to talk about are, we have talked about these ones. Now, the various approaches that we take were classified by Kuno for the portal pedicle, because in the picture that you have is a portal pedicle. And Kuno said that either you can take one of the three approaches, something called as intrafascial approach, which means you identify each and every structure, like the portal vein, the hepatic ducts, and you identify the arteries, and then you identify each and every one in the thing, and you then loop out these structures as you require. It's a very tedious one. Extrafascial is something that is easier to do, which means that if this is the pedicle, you then can ligate the pedicle hole. Final, this is an extrafascial and transfissural. Now this is important because all the fissures that I have told you, they are now important with the hilar and the umbilical plates, particularly if you follow the fissures that are there. Say for example, I want to go to the segment 2, 3 or segment 4. It is then good to understand that these are the ways to go into this 2, 3 and this, and then encroach upon the particular pedicle. So this completes the story about what is what in this picture and your various approaches to the portal pedicle. So we have talked about the various segments. Now the division of the liver by this time, you know that the division of the liver has been the middle hepatic, the right hepatic, and the left hepatic. And then we divided it into these things. Finally, the entry into the liver was done by the portal pedicle, which divided the liver, as you can see very quickly, 2, 3, 4, A, 4B, 5, 6, 7, 8. This portal pedicle came like a tree, and exactly I mentioned the word tree because the tree grows and then it divides into the right and the left. Now, out of this right and the left, the things are not so easy. So it is good enough to know a couple of things about the biliary anatomy, about the vascular anatomy, because when you talk about a liver resection, the last class on liver resection, we told about the steps of liver resection. The basic steps of liver resection are only to know about the anatomy. When you know the anatomy, the things of these are extremely simple. When you talk about first the biliary anatomy, out of the biliary anatomy, vascular anatomy, that means the word vascular will not be a good word. I will tell the word arterial anatomy, and the last one is portal vein anatomy. Now, when I talk about all of these anatomies, which one of these anatomies is the most constant of all anatomies?
Portal vein.
Very good. Is only the portal vein. That means it is usually the bile duct and the hepatic arteries, which always has a competition around who is going to be more variant. Believe me, people have really not addressed these issues, or they have tried, but series differ. Some people say no, arterial anatomies are more difficult, to understand than biliary anatomy, but probably biliary anatomies are more difficult or more varied than an arterial anatomy. So let us start with biliary anatomies quickly, and let us try to understand what is this biliary anatomy that I am interested with. As I have said, I am more interested on the liver side of the story rather than extrahepatic side of the story. Now, when I talk about the liver side of the story, the first is, as I have said, the right duct and the left duct. We will not be going below the right duct and the left duct today. We will be going back to the liver. When I talk about the left duct is made by segment 2 and segment 3 and segment 4. Now, when I talk about the segment 4, remember that the left pedicle or the left duct, if you think over with this to be the left duct, and this is 2 and this is 3, the 4 is known to join it either in the umbilical fissure, as you know, and in this umbilical fissure, what is important is the 4 usually joins in this umbilical fissure, and what is important is the 4 is usually hidden and joins in this part. Sometimes what happens is the 4 is now, sometimes what happens is that there are multiple variations in this one. One of the variations that are more common is that the 3 as such makes a pedicle, okay, and 4 joins a pedicle. What is important is that the 2 joins at this trifurcation, and as I've said, things are then really very difficult. But what is important is that will make the biggest problem is the left hepatic duct itself becomes a very small duct then. So that is usually a very rare anatomy. Majority of people will have this kind of anatomy with around 4 centimeter of the left hepatic duct. Now this is very important because this duct is what you require. I thought about this duct in the initiation because when you go for a biliary bypass, this is this duct which I always need to find at, as I told you in the beginning. If this is the hilum of the liver, what is the structure that is guiding me to this duct? What is the structure, sir, that is guiding
Falciform
me to
ligament.
this? Is the falciform. So please remember that for all biliary surgeons, if you want to do a biliary bypass, join an intestine, try to find this duct. More or less, until and unless you have this rare problem, you will get a 4 centimeter duct to join, which is pretty good. Okay. Now, talk about the right duct. More or less, all of us who have done open biliary enteric anastomosis, number of open biliary enteric anastomosis, what becomes very important is the right duct, more or less, is much more difficult to see than the left duct. It is very understandable. Now, the problem in the right duct is there are multiple variants of the right ducts, which are not something that we are going to talk about today. But when you talk about the bifurcation, or when you talk about technically the confluence, something that we need today because we are talking about the liver anatomy, what is important is that the confluence technically means the right anterior and the right posterior joined together. Now, this is usually something that happens in front of the portal vein or the left branch of the portal vein. There can be other trifurcations or other patterns, but what is important in the right is there can be multiple segmental veins which join into the right hepatic veins before they form the confluence, or these segmental veins are going to join into the hepatic veins. So this is all about the biliary anatomy that we are required to know as of today. Talking about the arterial anatomy, which is more important to a liver surgeon, because he is going to deal with not the bile ducts particularly, he is going to deal with, while he is doing a liver resection, more about the arterial story. Now, the word arterial stories as I have said. Well, nature is very a gifted surgeon, and he likes to test the skill of other surgeons by testing. See how much varied I can become. So what happens is that in 80% of the cases, the common hepatic artery is known to arise from the celiac. That means in 20% it does not. Okay. What is important is that in about 10% of the cases, the common hepatic artery is known to arise from the superior mesenteric artery. You say, oh my God. And in the rest 10% of the cases, there is no common hepatic artery. You say, array, then if that is so, how the hell does things happen? In these problems, what happens is the right hepatic and the left hepatic are on their own, and they are known to arise either from the hepatic or either from the celiac or the SMA, and they are going to go to the liver independently. So this is the first primer to start the day with. The second of the problem is if you talk about the right hepatic artery, as we have known, the common hepatic artery comes, joins the main hepatic and divides into the right hepatic and the left hepatic artery. Now, this is what we have been taught in anatomy. The stories again are not so simple. What is important is right hepatic artery in this picture. This is what happens in 80% of the cases. Okay, very nice. So what happens then in the other ones? In the other ones, what happens is, hello? Now, what happens in the other story is that there is something called as a replaced right hepatic artery. Now, what is a replaced right hepatic artery? What is a replaced right hepatic artery is that the left hepatic artery is a continuation of the common hepatic artery. So this is something that arises from the celiac. Now, if this is something that arises from the celiac, the next neighbor is SMA, and this gives rise to something called as the right hepatic artery. This is seen in about 15% of the cases. Hello? Right? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is important because this is an anatomy that you have to know for not only your NEET, but also for your lab colis. Because again, as I've told, 15% is not that less, sir. The more you do lab colis, the more you will understand how dangerous that operation is. There is something called as an accessory right hepatic. What is this accessory right hepatic story? Accessory right hepatic means that the normal anatomy, as you have said, celiac, common hepatic, right hepatic, left hepatic, and then from the SMA, there is another thing that goes and is called as a accessory right hepatic. Now, why should I be knowing about all of these? Why should I be writing about all of these? The thing to remember is that these two arteries that I have written, the accessory, the right hepatic arteries, and these accessory right hepatic arteries, two only important points to understand in this part. Point number one is, if you consider both of these arteries in relation with this being the celiac and this being the superior mesenteric, where do you think you are going to encounter these arteries if I am planning to do a Whipple's? If the patient doesn't replace right hepatic, where do you think this is going to come, sir?
Hepatoduodenal ligament.
I understand that, sir. Let us talk with the pancreas. Then let us enter hepatoduodenal later, sir. Can you see that in this picture? What is the most obvious logical thing that is going to happen? Simple. This is going to go behind the pancreas, isn't it? And then it is going to enter the hepatoduodenal ligament, and then it is going to go to the liver. That means while you do a Whipple's, please remember that at one point of time in history, This was considered to be a contraindication for doing a Whipple's because people did not understand what to do with that artery. Now that we have understood that our techniques have improved, we have understood that this needs to be ligated or understood that we need to do an angiogram, we have respected the artery. The second point is, while you do a lap chole, always understand this replaced and the accessory right hepatics are always a content of the Calott's triangle, your cholecystohepatic triangle. Please remember this one. They are in all cases a content of the Calott's triangle. So please, whenever you have skeletonized the Calott, if there is something extra, please try to track it down to the liver. You may be taking out a replaced right hepatic or an accessory right hepatic. So this is all about the artery story. Talk about the left hepatic artery. Now, left hepatic artery variations are lesser than that of the right hepatic, so as to say. That means the conventional anatomy will be, if this is the celiac, this is the right hepatic, this is the left hepatic artery. And if this is the left hepatic artery, in 80% of the cases, it is arising like this, like the right hepatic had. And then what happens is that in 20% of the cases, if this is the right hepatic artery, from celiac, you get the left gastric artery, which gives rise to the left hepatic artery in 20%. So please remember, the replaced left hepatic artery arises from a celiac, left gastric artery, and this left gastric artery, please remember, is found in which ligament then?
Falciform.
Falciform. Array. How can you get it in the falciform?
Hepatogastric ligament.
Hepatogastric ligament. Which operation will you encounter this artery? Common benign operation. Because remember, in vagotomy, the minute you mobilize this ligament, you need to find the posterior vagus, isn't it? So when you like to find the posterior vagus, you are going to cut through this ligament, sir. And the minute you go, you are going to cut through this ligament like this, you say that, oh my God, there is such a big pulsating artery that was coming. Your assistant tells, sir, let us cut it, sir. And then by the time your assistant has realized, congratulations, you have cut the only arterial supply to the left liver. So please understand, this can be the anatomy. So please take a note of this anatomy at least. Okay. So this is the first part of the story to remember. Now, there is something also called as an accessory left hepatic. Like you had an accessory right hepatic, there is an accessory left hepatic whose anatomy will be easy. So this is the right hepatic, this is the left hepatic artery. The accessory left hepatic again comes from the left gastric and is like this. This is said to be the second most common, with 35% of the patients said to be like this. Now, statistics are a bit confusing. If this is the most common variant, this is said to be the second most common. Some people say that no, this is the second most common. So this is the first part of the story. More or less, these are all the things that are required to know in the arterial anatomy. Portal vein anomalies are extremely rare. So what is important is portal vein anatomies, as I've said, are extremely rare. They do not usually happen into that stories ever. But now there are some other things that go beyond the portal vein. We have told about the portal veins, we have told about the umbilical features, umbilical plate. Then a few things in the liver, particularly of a laparoscopic importance, is called a sulcus of Rouvier. Okay. Now, sulcus of Rouvier, all laparoscopic cholecystectomies, the god of laparoscopic cholecystectomies always have to pray and to the sulcus of Rouvier before they start the worship of doing a laparoscopic cholecystectomy. Okay, watch this sulcus is the sulcus of Rouvier. Can you tell me what is the content of the sulcus of Rouvier, sir?
Right sectoral duct.
Good one. So that means right sectoral duct is a very good answer, sir. Okay, can you be more specific? Sir, very important thing is that this part or this one, technically enough in a simple line, contains the right pedicle. Now, what do you mean by the term right pedicle? Now, right pedicle technically means that this is a structure that usually contains on the superficial aspect pedicle number 5 and pedicle number 6. On the deeper aspect, they will contain pedicle number 7 and pedicle number 8. So, if you are thinking about doing a liver resection and you want to find which sector is what, this is the time to do your surgery. You have to attack in this plane. Okay, so if you have to do, that means individual sectors needs to be ligated. This is the area that God has made probably for liver surgeons to make them understand that you have to dissect in this area, you have to skeletonize each of these 4 pedicles, and then you have to attack them. So this is an important thing and an easy way to do that. Now, the other side of the story is, while doing a lap chole, what is the importance about knowing this in a lap chole, sir?
To dissect a bone.
Very good. The only point is, do not ever go below the sulcus of Rouvier. You are never going to go below the sulcus of Rouvier. Because if you are dissecting below the sulcus of Rouvier, that's it. You will be injuring the right portal pedicle. That is guaranteed. So please don't dissect below the sulcus of Rouvier. That's it. Now, there are other small things that important points to remember are, so more or less we have talked about all the parts of the liver, etc. Hepatic veins, nothing that important to talk about. In hepatic veins, the only important point is the majority of the anatomy of the hepatic veins are that in hepatic veins, usually there will be a right hepatic vein and the middle hepatic and the left hepatic joined together by a common trunk, and the left hepatic vein. That's it. So these are all the things. Okay. So more or less, ladies and gentlemen, we have completed the anatomy of the liver. The last class I told about the surgical anatomy beyond the liver resection story. Today you have the anatomy proper to enter the liver for the surgical dissection. Okay. Your questions, please now.
Sir, Rouvier sulcus contains the right hepatic duct, no?
Sir, the word is pedicle. Pedicle. Remember that there is nothing called as right hepatic duct. I told you, I showed you the picture. Where is the picture of that pedicle that I drew? Can you see the pedicle, sir? All the 3 things, the portal vein, the hepatic artery, and the bile duct, all of them are in the Glisson's capsule. So in this Glisson capsule, remember I told you there are 3 techniques. Intrafascial, extrafascial means you take the full pedicle, and extrafascial and transfissural. So if you are wanting to do one pedicle, so again, right segment 8, that is the independent pedicle. Identify that and that's it. Your job is done.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay?
Excuse me, sir. So while identifying the segments, we definitely need some radiological backup, right?
Always.
Otherwise,
Now see, number 1 is that. Now how do you learn? I will tell you how I learned the picture. First of all, I learned it from the books that you guys are reading. Number two is that I brought a liver from our cadaver guys, and then I started dissecting, and then I understood how difficult it is to understand if you are not primed. The more I dissected, then I understood that, okay, the things are now going to make me understand. Still, I did not operate on a human being. Then I went to my radiology department, and the radiology people, particularly if you talk to a transplant radiologist, they are expert in going to tell you the arterial anatomy, the venous anatomy, and the hepatic venous anatomy. Now, what about the biliary anatomy? Now, they can also do an MRCP, but MRCP and the biliary anatomies are not very well predictive because you see, they are not usually real-time images. Arterial and venous anatomies are real-time images. But if you get an arterial anatomy, I think that is pretty enough to tell you like which artery is going to which segment. And then these radiologists are so accurate that they are going to tell you that from the bifurcation, you have a 5 millimeter distance. From the 5 millimeter, it is like tracking on your Google map. That there is a cake shop. From that bifurcation, take 4 steps down, take a left, and then you will find the cake shop. The radiological guidance is extremely important to make your mind map. But remember, you are driving the car, so you have to know the road. So that is the job of a surgeon. Okay. If there are no other questions, ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I have got a question which is out of the today's topic.
Yeah, please.
Sir, like today in the evening, we have got our theory exam schedule, like for DNV theory. It's on 24 to 27 of August. So we have around 50 days in our hand. So, sir, like, should we plan our theory preparation? Like, we just wanted this guidance on this.
Theory paper on which paper? On which
Sir,
subheading
DNV,
unit?
sir, DNV.
Which subheading do you need? I understand DNV paper. Which subheading? General surgery, GI, endocrine. Which one?
Sir, like overall, how we should plan a theory for this next 50? What should be our strategy for theory preparation?
Your strategy for reading for the last 50 days.
Yes,
see,
sir.
if you are dividing the time, definitely, say, presume you are reading around 4 to 6 hours per day with all the hospital duties that you will have with your duties to do around. Okay. If you get 4 to 6 hours per day to read, if more than that, that's nice. Then the first one is that target the last 3 years papers of your DNV exams, because then that is going to tell you what are the hot topics and what are the trending topics. Number one.
Okay.
Number two is that, so that is the number one prime thing that you need to do. The last 3 years papers. If time does allow you, go to the last 5 years papers, because the last 5 years papers you are going to get the trend of the questions, and some questions, maybe say for example, the follow-up of patients of differentiated thyroid cancer. That came as a paper around 5 years back. Thereafter came repeatedly for the last 2 to 3 years, except for the last 1 year, to the best of my knowledge, this question was not repeated. So that means this question has been in trend and is worth preparing for exams. Now, say for example, management of bile leak or management of intraoperative management of bile duct injury. Now, these questions have come for last 3 years and 5 years and are questions that are going to come. So these are questions that whatever book you have read, whatever notes are there with you, it is good worth reading those notes, particularly whatever time you have, rather than write 1 page on this. It is good to write around 1 paragraph with a mental map around that. What is the way I am proceeding to make that picture? Or if I have a question of 10 marks on a bile duct injury, what are the points that I am going to write? At least write that in a say notebook. Finally, you get those questions which you have never heard of, or those questions appeared for the first time. Then I will say try to avoid those questions because you have never heard about those questions and their chances of being repeated are very less. So the last 1 hour of the day, whatever time you have, you can just go on searching for a few brief ideas about that question. Say for example, the advanced or say focused parathyroidectomy or gamma knife surgery for brain metastasis. These are topics that you have not read well, neither do you have books that have written them well. It is good around. There are some questions which all question papers will have for the last couple of years, which are going to come from genetics and molecular biologies. Say, for example, the molecular biology of GISTs. Now, this is something that you are not very prepared with. So, it is good to guess around those questions. Think about which are the topics which have an important molecular biology question that has come. Examples say thyroid. Breast is always a perennial molecular biology question. Breast, colon, thyroid are the three more important things. So it is good enough to learn about their genetics, HNPCCs, APCs, thyroid cancer pathogenesis, and in breast, types of cancer and what are the treatment decisions that are taken on these cancers. Okay. So this is what usually is the story. And please start preparing and best of luck for your exams.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Thank you.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, what book we have to prefer? Because I have prepared for exam aspect in a very lenient way. So I have prepared only reading GI from the table. And the rest of the cover of the things I have not even read. But on the day-to-day basis of the cases I have read, but in different books. So I have to go through one book only.
No. See, one important thing, sir. In a surgical postgraduate exam, I used to consult around 5 to 6 books because, as you have very rightly said, there are various topics that are better in some books that are not at all better in Sabiston or SWATs. Say, for example, surgery for ulcerative colitis. Surgery for ulcerative colitis is not that very well given in Sabiston. There are much better notes that I have for surgery for ulcerative colitis. So that is the way I will proceed. Your approach is a good one. Proceed on to the best of the topics that are written in every areas. Definitely one book will be insufficient.
Okay, sir. Because my SR is telling to read only SRB and...
No, absolutely not, sir. Absolutely not. See, one important thing. Please remember that when you go to a restaurant, whatever is his favorite food will not be your food, sir. You will have your own taste, you will have your own likes and dislikes. So it is like reading for a postgraduate entrance. And number two is that in a PG entrance examination, I really beg to differ from the gentleman in which he says that one book is good for all. No, sir, absolutely not. Each book has its own advantages and disadvantages, chapters which are better in one book. Like parathyroid, the last day I told you, read exactly from Bailey Love. Yeah. That is beautifully written in Bailey Love. If you have read Bailey Love, you will understand why did I tell you to read Bailey Love. So nicely written that it is technically a compilation of 4 or 5 books. You do not need to think about reading Bailey Love. Okay? Right.
Sir, today we and Alice has talked about that. So can you guide one day
okay, then, yeah.
For all the general surgery and all the syllabus aspects?
Sir, I will be talking probably on Tuesday. I will be talking about general and GI both. Because endocrine I have completed. Yeah, definitely. You have 50 days. So by Tuesday, I will be talking about general and GI. That will be, endocrine is done. General and GI will be completed, means 80% if its syllabus is done.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
Sir, actually, मुझे पूछना था portal vein on hepatic artery. Hello. Sir, they are portal vein providing 80% of the blood and hepatic artery is providing 20%. So मुझे पूछना था सर कि ऑक्सीजन कितना देता है, portal vein कितना देगा और hepatic artery कितना देगा?
Now, sir, important question. Nutrition to the liver. Now, if you remember that undergraduate thing that we told, portal vein is responsible for supplying 60% of the oxygen and around 40% or 50% of oxygen and 50% of oxygen is given by the hepatic artery. So if you remember that 50-50 rule, 50% of oxygen by the portal vein and 50% of oxygen by the hepatic artery. Some people beg to differ. They say that no, 60% of oxygen is by portal vein 40% by the artery. Nutrition is reverse. 80% of nutrition, or reverse, or in other way, nutrition is 80% by the portal vein, 20% by the artery. Okay.
sir. Okay.
So that means if you have to sacrifice one, which one are you going to sacrifice? Automatically you are going to sacrifice a artery rather than vein. Now all said and done, things are not so simple, sir. You cannot ligate any branch of the portal vein. That is ekdam pakka. If you are ligating, say for example, in a disease of a left lobe of the liver, you are going to embolize the left portal vein so that the right portal vein gets all the blood, all the food, and the right portal vein gets hypertrophied. So now you can go for a resection of the left side of the liver. Have I made you understand this concept? Hence, if there is a tumor on the left side, you embolize the left portal vein so that the right portal vein takes on all the food and the right liver becomes big. Now, that means under any circumstance, if you are ligating a branch of the portal vein, that lobe of liver is gone. 1 to 2 weeks or 3 weeks down the line, you have to take off that lobe because that lobe of the liver is not getting any food. It is going to die. It is as simple as that. It is going to atrophy, and that atrophied liver is going to be no use. It is going to die. That's it. Talk about the artery. When you ligate a common hepatic artery, the problem is the liver is going to live, but the liver is going to face 40% of the oxygen in the liver is off. Now,
Yes.
If someone has 40% of the oxygen that is off, what do you think is going to happen to the liver, sir? That is not a very happy finding for the liver. The liver gets hypoxic, liver goes to an anaerobic metabolism mode, and there are a lot of changes that happen in the liver, which may not be very sustainable for long-term survival. Now, that means if you have to ligate a branch of the artery, right hepatic or the left hepatic, that is still an acceptable answer. That if you ligate a right hepatic artery, will it create a nuisance? The answer is no, if you ligate it before the hilum. Because at the level of the hilum, there are multiple transverse anastomotic branches between the right and the left hepatic arteries. Okay? So, that is all about the arterial and the portal vein and the arteries.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, right. No other questions, I presume? Thank you then. Good night. Okay, Shilajit. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.